been about 8 months since I've shared with all of you kind of a view of all of my tanks, kind of a fish room tour. I've got about 30 tanks. A lot has changed since that last video that I did back in January. A lot of you have asked for updates. You've asked for updates on various tanks or all my tanks. So I promised some of the viewers that I would go ahead and do an update video on my fish room, on all of the tanks that I'm keeping, and kind of bring you guys along to show you what's new. Now let's keep in mind that there are a lot of tanks. I've got 30 or so tanks right now, so I don't want to spend too much time and make this a long, drawn-out video and bore everybody to death. So it's just going to be kind of a real quick update, tank by tank, to show you what's going on. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can ask those down below, and then I'll go back after this video uploads and respond to comments and be able to answer any questions that I might be able to as far as these specific tanks. So let's just start from the beginning, and we're going to kind of go around in a circle. Some of the tanks I'm going to talk about a little bit more than others. Some of them are just kind of, you know, work tanks. So let me just explain that real quickly. So a work tank is basically just a bare bottom tank that I'm using for quarantine purposes, for you know, raising out, growing out fish, etc. Nothing much to see. It's just basically a glass box with some filters and the fish in there. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time in those tanks. Also, some of the tanks are kind of in the middle of being scaped, or they're not quite done yet, or, you know, I have some concepts in mind, but they're not finished, so we won't spend much time on those either, but I will take you through and show you everything that's going on. So starting off right here, right behind me, this is a 75-gallon tank. This is an Mbuna only tank. These are African cichlids. I've made videos about these in the past. So basically this is a not a species only, but basically it's just Mbuna only in here, and it's 75 gallons. I have a Zis filter and a sponge filter, and the sponge filter is stacked, so it's stacked with a double sponge filter and a Zis filter, and that's about it. Moving right along, right next to it is another 75-gallon tank. This is the African mudskipper tank, and I also have a figure 8 puffer in there. It's brackish water. Brackish water is a mixture of salt and fresh water. So in here I have kind of a whole land area with a beach, and that's where the mudskippers spend the majority of the time. And then on the other side I've got kind of the water area, and that's where the figure 8 puffer is. Now, some of you may have noticed in other videos recently that there are some small fish swimming in there. Those are actually some guppies. So I had some extra guppies, and figured I'd put them in there because they do well in brackish water. Last time I tried this, I did have some get eaten, but this time around, these were just kind of some extra guppies. I had to cull some. So I figured I would stick those in there, see how they do, and they've actually done quite well. And they're a little bit too small and fast for the mudskippers to catch, and the puffer leaves them alone. So anyway, I've got some guppies in there. I might pull them out later or whatever, but anyway, just kind of an experiment. So next up, we've got a Tanganyikan tank. This is a 29-gallon tank. It has some Julidochromis in there, the Transcriptus, and I also have some redfin calvus. The Transcriptus, the Julies have spawned a few times, so I do have a bunch of them in there. And then I think I have 4 of the calvus in there. They're pretty much kind of hiding in the rocks all the time. It's a very kind of rock-scaped tank. It's a bunch of dry coral, a bunch of dry rock that I put in there. So it's been great. They've reproduced, and I think they like hiding in all the kind of the caves and crevices that the coral provides. Down below, we've got a couple tanks. We've got a 40 breeder right here. Nothing much to see. I've got my Congo tetras in there right now, just because I have to kind of move some stuff around. And I do have a few guppies in there that were a leftover from another tank. And then right next to it, there's another 40 breeder. This is the tank with the 5-star generals. Those are a West African cichlid. And the reason why I moved the Congo tetras out is because the 5-stars had spawned, and I wanted... They spawned a couple times. The first time the fry didn't survive. I didn't know if they got eaten by the Congos, so I pulled the Congos out. I want to see if the 5-stars will do it again, and if they can breed and have those some of the fry survive. Otherwise, I'm going to combine the Congos and the 5-stars again to do kind of a West African theme. But I'm going to kind of densely scape that tank, so there'll be lots of hiding places for the 5-star generals if they do decide to spawn. And then also lots of free area for the Congos to swim around. Underneath the tank over here, not much to see. It's just kind of an empty, not empty, but it's a work tank. It's just got a bunch of guppies. So right there. and I also use that for quarantine at times if I need to quarantine tanks. Speaking of quarantine, I do have some other tanks. So in a recent video, you guys know that I got a new Oscar. Well, I got 2 new Oscars, and they are both in here. They're kind of hiding right there. And this is a 20-gallon tank. I just set it up real quickly, and this is a quarantine system. Moving over here to another really popular tank. This is the Indian mudskipper tank. So just like the other tank, the African mudskipper tank, this is also, it's a paludarium, so meaning it's water and land. And this is also brackish water, so again, it's a mixture of salt water and fresh water. In here I have 8, do I have 8? No, 6, I'm sorry. I have 6 Indian mudskippers, and I have 8 bumblebee gobies. Now, mudskippers are part of the goby family, so they are fish. They're not amphibians like some people think. They're actually a fish, and they spend the majority of their time, you know, kind of at the surface, you know, sitting on a rock or resting on a beach. So I've got 6 of them in there. They're very fun. They'll eat out of my hands. The bumblebee gobies are very active and fun to watch. This is one of my favorite tanks. Very interesting. I do have some mangroves in there. I've got some Java moss growing on a piece of coral, and I do have an Anubias plant that's growing on a piece of wood. So the Anubias plant and the Java moss have to be immersed, so they can't be submerged because it's brackish water. But they're doing well, and I just gotta squirt them down with some tank water, some fresh water, just to make sure that they stay moist and can get nutrients, etc. But overall, a really enjoyable tank. Underneath the Indian mudskipper tank, I do have a couple more quarantine tanks. These are just 10-gallon tanks. Right now I'm quarantining some cardinal tetras, and I'm quarantining some loaches. I've got some loaches in here that I got for some snail control. So right now they're in quarantine, and I'm gonna put those in another tank as they grow. Next to those 2 tanks, there's 2 more kind of grow out tanks. Right now I just have a couple of bettas in there. The reason why is the bettas kind of help keep the sponge filters cycled, so I could, you know, use them at any time. But they're just a couple of 10-gallon tanks. Eventually those will be kind of some overflow tanks. Eventually those will be some overflow tanks for my shell dweller breeding program. Another fun tank that I have in here is another Tanganyikan tank. And this is a 20-gallon tank that I have some Burchardi in. These are some fish that I pulled from upstairs, so we're gonna see those in a little bit. Those are in my Tanganyikan tank upstairs. But anyway, I pulled these down because I want to do some breeding and spawn these down here as well. And while we're on the theme of spawning and talking about breeding, we do have a whole bunch of Neolamprologus multifasciatus. Those are the shell dwellers. They are in here in this 20-gallon tank. These are all juvenile and fry. So I had some adults in here that I had in here specifically to spawn. They had a bunch of babies, and then I pulled the adults out. So all the babies are growing up in here. There's probably like 40 or 50 in this tank right now. And then down below, as you can see in these 10-gallon tanks, these are also set up for shell dwellers. So I do have the adults down there. Some of those I will sell, and then some of the adults spawned again. So we'll have more babies to give away and sell in the future. This is pretty much my only planted tank down here in the fish room, and it just has some swords and some Java moss and a whole bunch of guppies. I played around and I've done a whole bunch of different things with this tank. This tank has evolved over the years. I've had this tank for many years actually. It's a 16-gallon bow front. Anyway, just a bunch of guppies in there right now. This tank right here, which is kind of sitting on an island in the middle of the fish room, it's a 37-gallon tank. Bare bottom, not much to see. Eventually I'm going to scape this tank to be a Burchardi tank, and the Burchardi that are in that 20-gallon are going to be in here, and this will just kind of be like a rock island tank for them. But right now I'm just growing out some peacock fry. Now this is a really fun tank. This is another Mbuna tank. These are dwarf Mbunas. These are the Pseudotropheus celosi. The one thing I love about these is they stay small, but the other thing that I love is that they have some really brilliant colors. The males are a bright blue with some black bars, and the females stay yellow. So very easy to distinguish between the males and the females with these Mbuna. And yeah, right now I'm just happy to have this small little colony, and we will see if I can get some fry out of them. Underneath the celosi tank, we have another 40 breeder. Not much here. This is just a work tank full of juvenile African cichlids that I am growing out that eventually will look like these. So these, this is another African cichlid tank. These are a bunch of peacocks. These are all fry that I've raised over the last year or so. And these are just some of the ones that I decided to keep that I really fell in love with, either because of their color, etc. And so this is kind of like my display African cichlid tank down here in the fish room. So some of the fish that I'm growing out in that other tub will come out and be in this tank, and I might pull some of these out and then sell the rest. So anyway, these are all fry that I basically grew out from little tiny eggs to now some really beautiful fish. And then the last tank down here is the 125-gallon tank. Now, we've talked about this tank in recent videos. We know that this is where my Oscar lived, that passed away just a month and a half ago or so. I do have my other Oscar in here who has been kind of lonely and, you know, sulking. His name is Felix. He has been active lately. These last few days he's been interacting with me a little bit more. I've been getting him to kind of chase me a little bit and eating some crickets and stuff like that. So I know he's healthy. He's just kind of like hanging out and kind of sulling sometimes. So when those other Oscars that I just got are big enough to go in this tank, I'm going to put a divider, and then I'm going to let them both in here so they can kind of get a feel for one another, and hopefully they will end up being okay together. Otherwise, in here I do have some Synodontis catfish, and I do have a pleco. There might be a couple guppies swimming around in there because I was trying to do a little bit of live feeding when I was trying to get Felix kind of excited about eating again. He didn't really seem too interested in eating the guppies, just the freeze-dried foods that I was giving him. So I'll have to scoop them out and put them back in one of the other tanks. Now, if you're keeping count, that was 23 tanks. 23 tanks down in the basement. Now we're upstairs. I'm sitting in my living room, and where I'm sitting right now, I can actually see 4 of my tanks plus something special that we're going to talk about at the end of this video. But anyway, right behind me I have 2 of my African cichlid tanks. The one right here, just right there, that is my Tanganyika tank. It's a 60-gallon tank. It's filtered with some sponge pre-filters and a canister filter. And in here I have my shell dwellers, my Neolamprologus multifasciatus, and my Burchardi. So the shell dwellers that you saw downstairs and the PVC and the Burchardi that we talked about, they came from this tank. Over here, this tank is my 75-gallon Malawi peacock tank and some small haps. I do the overstocking method, so yes, it is very stocked as far as a 75-gallon tank is concerned. I do have a bunch of beautiful peacocks, some really big ones. I was filtering this with a canister filter, a sump, and a hang on the back. I've since removed the canister filter and decided to just use the sump, which I might talk about in a future video. And then I also do have the hang on the back that's doing some polishing and has some biological material in there for filtration as well. Moving right along, this is my 65-gallon planet tank. I've got a couple of discus in there, a whole bunch of carnal tetras, stir-by corridoras, some orange flash cockatoides, pistogramma. I've got autosynclus in here. I have a mono shrimp in here. I think that's it. A bunch of snails. But anyway, this is a high-tech planet tank. I've got a high-tech light, a Fluval 3.0. I've got, this is a sump. There's a sump system down below. I do inject CO2. The CO2 gets injected into the sump. And it's just been a beautiful tank. I'm very happy with it. I've had it up and running for about 13 months or so. And these past few months is really when it's kind of come into its own as far as, you know, being finished and completed and looking good. So really excited about this tank. Now we have my little nano reef tank. This tank I'm not so excited about. So it's a 5-gallon tank. You know, it's really small as far as reef is concerned. I have a cleaner shrimp in there. I've got some soft corals. I have some snails, some hermit crabs, and a firefish. But I'm not loving this tank, to be honest with you. I set this tank up about 9 months ago. I've had it running for about 9 months, but I really haven't caught the saltwater bug. So I'm not sure. I might end up doing something different, or I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this tank. If I'm going to keep it, if I'm going to keep saltwater, you know, reef, or what I'm going to do. But anyway, I have it for now. It's kind of okay. But yeah, I just haven't gotten a saltwater bug like a lot of people said I would. Now I am in the 3rd level of the house. So the fish room was on the basement. And then the display tanks that we saw earlier were in the living room, which is kind of the second level of the home. Now we're up on the third level, and this is currently my daughter's room, but she's going off to college in about like 10 days or something like that. So this room is gonna get converted into my office. Obviously she's still gonna have some stuff here, but this is gonna be basically my office. So I've set up this shelf with all my camera equipment, you know, a bunch of tripods, gimbals, etc. And I decided to reinforce the shelf and put a couple tanks here. So this top one is an ADA tank. This is kind of a rimless, like right around 5-gallon ADA tank. I do have a betta in there. And then down below, I have a bunch of guppies. So just kind of a fun little thing to have here in the room, especially if I'm gonna be sitting here all day working. I always wanna have, you know, some kind of fish near me so I can just take a look at the fish, take a break, and just kind of enjoy them. So that's why they're here. Okay, so if you're keeping count, that was 29. We had the 23 downstairs. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 in this room, and then the 2 upstairs is 29. So I said 30. You might be wondering what's that 30th tank, and there is something, and it's right out there, but I'm not gonna share with you what that is on this video. There are a couple reasons why. If you want to know what that is, you have to be a subscriber to this channel, and you have to hit the notification bell. The reason why is when I share what that is, and I've done it once before, I'll do it during a live stream. And when I do that live stream, I'll leave that video up for maybe a day, at the most 24 hours, and then I delete it and remove it from the internet. So if you want to know what's out there, and you do want to know what's out there because it's really cool, and it's changed quite a bit since I last shared what it was with the big reveal, you'll want to be subscribed and hit that notification bell so it pops up in your feed so you know when that live stream is happening and if it's been loaded for the last few hours or so, so you can get a chance to view it and see what's up before it gets deleted. So make sure you hit that subscription bell, hit that notification bell, etc., all that good stuff, so you can see what's going on out there. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for today. Kind of a longer video than I like to do, but I wanted to cram in every single tank almost. And since I promised, and it's been a long time, I didn't want to do a voiceover, so hopefully I kept it short enough. Hopefully you're still watching. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.